cartoon. Toons are supposed to make people laugh. You don't understand.
Roger Rabbit wasn't just a cartoon noir comedy, it was a full-scale cinematic revolution that nearly imploded under its own ambition. Animators were pushed past exhaustion, actors performed to empty air, and the blend of live action and animation rewrote Hollywood's rules forever. But behind the laughs and loony energy, chaos reigned. What audiences never saw was a production filled with lawsuits, explosions, and near mental breakdowns. Today we reveal 20 weird facts about Who Framed Roger Rabbit, secrets buried behind celluloid ink and rabbit ears. Bob Hoskins talked to Toons. For months after filming, Who Framed Roger Rabbit pushed Bob Hoskins to the edge of sanity, acting opposite empty air for months while pretending to see a cartoon world broke his sense of reality. He later confessed that he hallucinated Roger Rabbit in real life, hearing voices and seeing animated characters moving around his house. He had to take a year off acting to recover from what he called psychological whiplash. The shoot required him to imagine entire performances with nothing but tape marks and puppeteers waving sticks as eye lines. It wasn't a role, it was endurance theater. What audiences didn't know was that Hoskins' breakdown became a warning for future motion capture films, a reminder that pretending to live in another dimension has consequences even for the toughest actor. Steven Spielberg almost got the film banned in China. Disney wanted Who Framed Roger Rabbit to conquer the global box office, but Steven Spielberg's name almost doomed it overseas. China's government banned films associated with Spielberg after his earlier work on The Color Purple and Empire of the Sun offended officials. When Roger Rabbit arrived, Chinese censors nearly blocked it despite it being a Disney film. The studio had to downplay Spielberg's producer credit to sneak the film past regulators. Ironically, this made Roger Rabbit one of the few American films to slip through China's late 1980s censorship wall. It wasn't just a cartoon mystery, it was a diplomatic operation disguised as slapstick, and it quietly signaled Disney's future obsession with global politics decades before Marvel and Star Wars learned the same lesson. Christopher Lloyd refused to blink as Judge Doom. Christopher Lloyd transformed into one of cinema's creepiest villains by making one haunting decision: never blinking. He wanted Judge Doom to feel inhuman, like something that was barely wearing a human disguise. Throughout filming, Lloyd trained himself to deliver lines with his eyes wide open for minutes at a time. The result was a performance that unsettled audiences even before Doom's toon identity was revealed. Behind the scenes, crew members were disturbed by how lifeless Lloyd became during takes. He reportedly stayed in character between shots, glaring silently at everyone on set. It wasn't just acting, it was possession. Lloyd's unblinking stare turned Judge Doom from a comic villain into a nightmare and set a new bar for method acting inside fantasy cinema. Jessica Rabbit's animation nearly broke the team. Animating Jessica Rabbit was so technically complex it caused multiple animators to quit. Each frame demanded intricate lighting and hand-drawn reflections that had to match live-action shadows perfectly. Her iconic red dress wasn't just drawn, it was painted frame by frame with real metallic pigment to make it shimmer under studio lights. The illusion took weeks for mere seconds of screen time. Animator Russell Hall once said Jessica was like animating a piece of glass filled with fire. The stress of keeping her consistent between lighting setups drove the team into 12-hour days for over a year. It wasn't just pinup art, it was mathematical obsession. When she finally appeared on screen, the exhaustion was buried under perfection, a flawless fantasy carved from sweat and celluloid. Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny had to share equal screen time. Getting Disney and Warner Brothers characters in the same frame was an unprecedented legal nightmare. Both studios demanded that their mascots receive exactly equal screen time. That meant Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny had to appear together for identical lengths, measured down to fractions of a second. The scene where they parachute with Eddie Valiant was timed using stopwatches and storyboards approved by lawyers from both sides. Not a single frame could favor one character over the other. It wasn't a creative choice, it was corporate détente. The moment felt magical for audiences, but it represented months of tense negotiation and legal micromanagement. What viewers saw as harmony between cartoon icons was actually a fragile peace treaty inked in Hollywood's most paranoid boardrooms. The Weasel actors were forced to improvise without seeing anything. The gang of animated weasels might look chaotic and hilarious on screen, but for the live-action cast, it was utter confusion. The actors had no idea what the weasels would eventually look like or where they'd appear in the frame. Director Robert Zemeckis encouraged them to improvise insults and physical reactions to empty space. On set, wooden cutouts stood in for the tunes while puppeteers wiggled sticks to indicate where movement might happen later. The weasel voices were added months afterward, forcing animators to match lip syncs to jokes no one had heard yet. It wasn't polished filmmaking, it was madness disguised as comedy. The result was a perfectly timed frenzy that felt alive, even though every cackle, every fall, every punchline existed only inside imagination until post-production. The Ink and Paint Club scene took 6 weeks to shoot. The iconic Ink and Paint Club sequence where humans and toons mingle in smoky nightclub glamour became one of the hardest shoots of the decade. Each glass splash and tray collision had to be timed so the Weiss animated penguin waiters could later interact with real props. Every motion required 3 separate takes, one clean plate, one with puppeteers, and one with the actors. When Jessica Rabbit performed her sultry number, the animators had to rotoscope her movements through shifting lights and drifting cigarette smoke which distorted her curves frame by frame. The scene that lasts just a few minutes on screen consumed 6 exhausting weeks of filming. It wasn't magic, it was math. The precision and insanity behind that nightclub made it a defining moment for hybrid cinema. Charles Fleischer wore a rabbit suit on set every day. Charles Fleischer didn't just voice Roger Rabbit, he lived as him. To help the other actors visualize where Roger would be, Fleischer wore a full-body rabbit suit, complete with gloves, bow tie, and ears, while performing his lines off-camera. He insisted that Bob Hoskins and Joanna Cassidy deserved a live performance, not just disembodied audio. The costume was ridiculous, but it worked. Fleischer's energy helped the cast time their reactions to Roger's unpredictable personality. Crew members often cracked up between takes, watching an adult man hop around the set delivering cartoon-level energy in full seriousness. It wasn't cosplay, it was commitment. Fleischer's bizarre dedication gave Roger his spark and ensured the animated character felt emotionally tethered to the real world he invaded. The film nearly bankrupted Touchstone Pictures. Who Framed Roger Rabbit was the most expensive animated film ever made at the time, with a budget that ballooned past $70 million, an astronomical risk in 1988. Disney executives panicked as costs spiraled out of control due to endless reshoots and complicated post-production. Robert Zemeckis demanded another year to perfect the animation, while the studio feared collapse. Crews were working around the clock across London and Los Angeles. Insiders called it Disney's Apocalypse Now because every day seemed like the last. When the movie finally premiered, it not only saved Touchstone Pictures, it resurrected Disney's reputation for innovation. The gamble that nearly destroyed a studio ended up redefining visual effects forever. Not a disaster, but a rebirth through sheer insanity and faith in cartoon chaos. The crew hid dozens of inappropriate gags in the background. The animators behind Roger Rabbit had a rebellious streak and filled the film with blink and miss gags that slipped past censors. From suggestive reflections in Jessica's dress to hidden text scrawled across alley walls, the team used the chaos of overlapping animation to sneak in adult jokes. One notorious frame even led to Disney pulling the VHS years later for a quiet edit. These weren't accidents, they were acts of defiance by artists tired of corporate oversight. The studio demanded family friendliness, but the animators remembered the anarchy of the early Looney Tunes days. They smuggled that spirit back in through hidden drawings. Go ahead and like and subscribe, because what comes next shows that even the actors didn't know how far the madness went. 11. Kathleen Turner wasn't credited for Jessica Rabbit's voice. Jessica Rabbit's hypnotic voice was performed by Kathleen Turner at the height of her fame, yet she went uncredited in the film. Turner volunteered to remain anonymous because she thought the mystery would enhance the character's allure. The studio agreed, seeing it as a publicity trick. For years, audiences speculated about who truly voiced Jessica, with rumors ranging from Cher to Michelle Pfeiffer. Turner finally confirmed her role during an interview years later, saying she loved that people were seduced by a voice without a face. What fans didn't know was that her smoky tone was recorded in a single marathon session, lit only by red lamps to capture mood. It wasn't acting, it was atmosphere. Turner's decision to stay hidden made Jessica less a character and more a myth whispered between generations of fans. Real ammunition was used during one scene. During the shootout inside the Acme warehouse, prop guns weren't always props. The special effects team used real blank ammunition to achieve authentic smoke and recoil for the live-action half of the sequence. It was a risky choice that terrified some crew members, especially with so many intricate timing marks for animated elements. Robert Zemeckis wanted the flashes to cast natural reflections for the animators to later integrate seamlessly. The decision created chaos as ear-splitting blasts echoed through the soundstage while actors ducked in genuine panic. It wasn't simulated danger, it was real adrenaline. The crew had to sign waivers acknowledging the risk. Ironically, the cartoon bullets that appear later in the scene were the safest part of the whole sequence. Hollywood Illusion was built on real heat and real fear. A secret Disney message was hidden in the opening scene. The film's opening cartoon sequence hides a quiet tribute to Disney's history. When Baby Herman storms off set, look closely at the background. The kitchen calendar shows the date, 1928, the year Mickey Mouse debuted. The prop master included it as a coded thank you to Walt Disney for inventing the era that Roger Rabbit parodies. Few viewers noticed at first, but the number became a lucky charm across the production. Crew members carved 1928 onto cameras and animation desks as a reminder that they were carrying Walt's rebellious spirit into the future. It wasn't a coincidence, it was an invocation. The movie may look chaotic, but beneath the gags beats a reverent heart for the dream that started with a mouse and ended with a rabbit. The film's lighting was hand-painted, frame by frame. Before digital compositing, every reflection, shadow, and light beam interacting with the animated characters had to be hand-painted on transparent cells. The team of 80 artists manually painted highlights to match the camera's shifting light sources in each shot. That meant studying every live-action frame to decide how light would bend across Roger's fur or Jessica's curves. It took over 50,000 hand-painted layers to achieve seamless realism. The slightest mismatch broke the illusion, so supervisors inspected frames under microscopes for alignment. It wasn't just animation, it was architectural precision. Each painted glint of light became an invisible triumph for craftsmen whose names most audiences never knew. The blend of analog dedication and cinematic innovation gave the movie its enduring warmth, something no digital shortcut could ever replicate. Bob Hoskins used his son to practice acting with tunes. To prepare for scenes with invisible characters, Bob Hoskins rehearsed at home with his young son, who pretended to be Roger Rabbit. Hoskins used toys and furniture as props to practice timing and eye lines while narrating imaginary chases. His son loved it until he saw the finished film and realized his father had been beaten up by cartoon characters. The boy refused to speak to him for 2 weeks, believing the tunes were real and cruel. Hoskins told the story years later, laughing at how convincingly the illusion worked even on his family. It wasn't method acting, it was fatherhood turned rehearsal. That playful bond between imagination and reality became the emotional core of Hoskins' performance, and why Eddie Valiant feels so human amidst impossible chaos. Roger Rabbit's ears were a technical nightmare. Roger's floppy ears became the film's most frustrating animation problem. They had to follow the laws of cartoon physics while still reacting believably to real-world lighting and gravity. Every time Roger turned his head, the animators redrew the ears in different arcs and shapes to match momentum. If they lagged too much, he looked sluggish. If too little, he seemed mechanical. The team built a software tool nicknamed the Earometer to track the motion mathematically, but it often failed, forcing manual corrections. Weeks were lost reanimating simple gestures like Roger scratching his head. What looked spontaneous on screen was agony on the drawing boards. It wasn't motion, it was obsession measured in pencil lines. Those bouncing ears became a symbol of perfectionism that nearly broke the animation department's sanity. A hidden alcohol problem almost halted filming. Bob Hoskins' character Eddie Valiant drinks heavily throughout the movie, but behind the scenes the drinking theme hit closer to reality. Some crew members struggled with burnout and exhaustion from 18-hour shifts leading to real bottles on set after hours. Production assistants quietly removed alcohol from props to avoid confusion during shooting. Zemeckis later admitted morale collapsed during the London sessions, with tempers flaring between animators and live-action teams. The chaos bled into the film's noir tone, where cynicism and exhaustion became almost autobiographical. It wasn't just acting, it was reflection. The line between fiction and fatigue blurred until the final wrap party, where the cast toasted the madness that almost destroyed them. The darkness Eddie carried wasn't all make-believe, it came from behind the lens. Disney's executives wanted to remove the toon violence. Executives at Disney panicked when they first saw test screenings. The cartoon violence was far more brutal than expected, with toons being flattened, electrocuted, and boiled in dip. The board worried parents would revolt, so they ordered major edits. Robert Zemeckis refused cutting nothing and argued that the exaggerated violence was faithful to the anarchic spirit of 1940s animation. The standoff lasted weeks until early audiences laughed rather than recoiled, convincing the studio to trust the director. It wasn't rebellion, it was preservation. Without that fight, Who Framed Roger Rabbit would have lost its bite and soul. The success that followed proved audiences could handle chaos if it came with heart and humor. What nearly got censored became the very energy that defined its immortality. Mel Blanc recorded his final performances for the film. Legendary voice actor Mel Blanc, the man behind Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, and countless others recorded his last major performance for Who Framed Roger Rabbit. At 80 years old, he stepped into the booth one final time to lend his voices to the Warner Brothers characters appearing in the film. Blanc's health was failing, but he powered through sessions fueled by nostalgia and respect for the craft. The crew reportedly gave him a standing ovation after his last take, knowing they were witnessing history close its circle. It wasn't just a cameo, it was a farewell to the golden age of animation. When Blanc passed away the next year, his gravestone carried his most famous line, "That's all, folks," echoing through a film that honored everything he built. The ending nearly featured a cameo from Mickey's dark twin. Early storyboards show a drastically different ending, where Eddie Valiant was rescued by Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, Walt Disney's original creation before Mickey. But legal issues blocked Oswald's appearance since Universal still owned the rights. The plan was to close the movie by uniting Disney's Forgotten Rabbit with its newest one, bridging 6 decades of animation history. It would have been poetic, but impossible. The moment was replaced by Roger's chaotic farewell instead. Years later, Disney finally regained the rights to Oswald, making the idea prophetic. What fans never saw was that Who Framed Roger Rabbit almost ended not with laughter but with closure, the forgotten mascot returning home to a studio that had moved on. Sometimes even cartoon history hides its heartbreaks. The real Toontown was built on a Nazi factory site. Few people know that the film's Toontown backlot was constructed inside a repurposed munitions factory in Elstree, England, originally used by the German Luftwaffe during World War II. The irony was staggering. A place that once built tools of war now produced slapstick joy. Crew members joked about hearing echoes in the hangar at night as if the ghosts of history were watching them paint bright cartoon skylines over old shadows. It wasn't just set design, it was reclamation of darkness into color. The laughter filmed there became a quiet act of defiance against the world's past madness. Who Framed Roger Rabbit didn't just mix live action and animation, it fused insanity and genius heartbreak and triumph into one frame. The chaos behind the camera built a masterpiece that still feels alive decades later. So next time you see Roger's ears wiggle, remember every sleepless artist who made them move. Like, share and subscribe, because this wasn't a movie, it was a miracle made by hand.